The title is Keeping Archives on the Front Burner Through Social Media. And our two presenters are Jennifer Brannick and Jennifer Ottinger. Jennifer Brannick is a professor and curator of rare books in Mississippiana at the University of Southern Mississippi. She has a BA in art history and an MSLS, I apologize, from the University of Kentucky. In special collections at Southern Miss, she coordinates bibliographic instructions, supervises general reference activities, coordinates outreach efforts, curates exhibits, and conducts collection development and management activities for Mississippiana, rare books, and genealogy. Her research interests include special collections, outreach, reference service, and mid-century publishing history. Our second presenter is Jennifer Ottinger. She is a graduate student at the University of Southern Mississippi, earning her MLIS as well as her Archives and Special Collections certificate, along with her Youth Services and Literature certificate. She attends virtually with plans to graduate in spring 2022 and live in Plano, Texas. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to you, Ms. Brannick.
Thank you. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about kind of social media and what we did in special collections when COVID hit. You know, with us, like I think with most y'all, we moved home in March of last year to start working from home. And we worked from home for about 3 months or so. I think I was back in the office by the end of June, I think. But, you know, I mean, so much of just the move home. I mean, first of all, you have to get home, figure out where you're going to work from that point on, deal with all your family dynamics, and then, you know, try to figure out what kind of work you can do from home. But, you know, so much of it is just, you know, how much you can, you know, reworking your work schedule and just trying to figure out, you know, how to deal with the, with the new thing. Because, again, it hit us all out of the blue, you know, and you know, so Wednesday night, I think right before, you know, everything shut down, that's when Trump went on the TV and said, everybody, you know, don't travel and don't do stuff. Well, we had tickets to leave that Friday to go on vacation out of the country. So we were just kind of like, you know, so it was really just a very traumatic time of just trying to negotiate life around what was happening and just get adjusted to new things. So getting adjusted, you know, in our case, you know, was very complicated because we have a lot of animals. We have 6 cats and a dog. And this is Dudley, who's always by my side. And just I think the next several pictures, just the evolution of Dudley kind of shows, you know, a little bit about how, you know, we were kind of adjusting. So, you know, he starts here. You could tell this was my first location too. I had to change location several times with working because, you know, things weren't comfortable. I mean, it's one thing working on a Saturday afternoon but then having to make it permanent was more difficult. So then there's Dudley kind of taking over the mouse, and he gets a little more, you know, aggressive as we go along. He's on top of the computer here, and then by the end, he's just like, no. And you can tell at this point I have moved to the kitchen to work because I don't have an office, you know, at home, so I just kind of, you know, do whatever I'm gonna do. But in addition to Dudley, you know, we have all the other ones. So all these suckers were just kind of, you know, rotating around, and you know, I mean, I can't imagine people who have children. Because with these, you know, with the animals, you can lock them on the other side of the house if you need to. I mean, children, I guess you could do that too, but you know, it's really probably not the way to do it. And then of course I had Dave sitting around, you know, every so often because he was excited because it's like, oh, we're going to be, you know, working from home together, you know, and so that was there was that. So then, you know, so much of the COVID work from home was kind of like almost a choose your own adventure. And these are the 4 adventures: the meat pizzas, where there's no dough, just meat. But you know, just how to do it. You know, there's a new workflow and new types of work that you're having to take on. You know, just even transferring the stuff that I would do at work to a home environment was just kind of weird, you know, and it just took several weeks of trying to, you know, kind of rework things. And, you know, I also realized that, I felt that I felt, and whether or not this is true or not, but I felt that I was working a lot harder and getting a lot less done. So that was kind of sums up, a lot of my, COVID kind of experiences and kind of what was, you know, um, how it was the transition from work to home. But the social media was the one thing that was the most surprising, because I thought that social media, so I manage the social media for special collections. We have someone who manages it for, a couple people post for DeGrummond, and then we have someone for the main library on campus as well. But so I do all the special collections social media, and I'm curious to see what other people think about this too. When they made the transition from, working from, like, during COVID, working from home and then going, or working, being at work and then coming home, is that I felt that when I looked at social media, even for fun, I just felt that the tone was weird. I thought that what people were posting was kind of odd. I mean, people weren't posting as much, and I just thought that the tone of social media was really just kind of whack. And of course, with all this working from, from home, there really wasn't much to publish, much to say. I mean, you could share things, but no one else was sharing anything either. I mean, no one was doing anything, And I found relief in Instagram, because the fashion, like, I look at fashion and food stuff, and those people are still going strong. I mean, they're still talking about the latest dresses and stuff. I'm like, thank you, God, there's a little bit of normalcy here, So I found that it was really difficult to figure out how to do social media during COVID. Because, initially, and this is just, I don't hope, well, initially I was like, oh, well, there's all this illness, this illness going around. It doesn't seem too bad. When it all first started, I was like, maybe I should bring up some, like, 1918 influenza stuff. I mean, because I was thinking, oh, it's topical, it's not bad. Of course, now I'm like, oh, Jesus, Jennifer, what were you thinking? I just didn't, because, we think of things that are topical, and, like, today's President's Day, let's throw a president up in there, so, but it was just, a very, to me, it was a very confusing social media time. So so social media took a back seat, and I really just didn't. I just kind of gave up on it for a little bit. I mean, every so often I would post a little something, but it really wasn't. It really wasn't, doing anything. And because of that, I think we lost, some of our momentum that was going at one point. But then we got back to the office. And so at that point, I was just trying to figure out how to re-engage. And what I ended up doing was just kind of sitting with it for a little bit. Because again, no one else, if I looked at other libraries' pages, it was kind of still a little quieter, and there wasn't much to even share tangentially, between the different places. And there were no conferences. I mean, it was just kind of a weird time. And I still felt kind of weird, with even putting up pictures of collections and stuff, because I just felt that was, we're in the middle of a pandemic. I'm like, look at this picture of this children's book from 1942. I mean, there's little things that were jumping in there. So, so I get back, and I start, kind of looking at different things. I talked to our social media person here at USM, or at the library, our communications person, and she was having a hard time too, and just trying to figure out the best way to do it. But life, so I just started posting periodically, and then in the fall we had the call for the Student Curator Program, where we select three students from the university to curate a one-case exhibit, and to each curate a one case exhibit. And through that process, we accept the submissions. Then the three curators, Ellen, Lorraine, and I, get together and look at the submissions and kind of discuss which ones we think would make the best, would work well in the exhibit cases. So as we're doing that, we're looking through them, and we came across Jen Ottinger's submission, and she was doing she had this really cool idea of going to the vintage cookbooks and preparing a different recipe, just from different ones, then talking about her process of making it, the things she came up with, and then kind of how it tasted, or what her taste testers thought of them. And we just thought it was such a great idea, and you almost hated to not really waste it, but waste it on a stagnant exhibit, an in-case exhibit, when you could have something that was more dynamic. So I reached out to Jen and see if she would be interested in doing this as a ongoing like kind of social media feature. And it really helped get things going again, and started, kind of get us thinking for different ways to do, different ways to do kind of content. And one thing I wanted to make sure to do, so because Jen's a graduate student in the library science program, is that I wanted to make sure that we had a title for her. So she and I, talked back and forth about the different titles that we could come up with, and so that's how we came up with guest social media content creator, which is a lot of words. But she's doing the work, and I want it to sound official so that when she puts it on her CV, it really says something, and kind of encapsulates what she does, and it's just not, library intern or something, kind of generic. I wanted to make sure that it had an official thing. So Jen's going to talk a little bit now about her process and how she went about getting all this together, coming up with the idea.
Well, I felt obligated to post my animal pictures, our pet photos, because Jennifer did. And so these are our furry friends. We have 4 guinea pigs, and I thought that was almost a good intro into my family that became my guinea pigs. And so although these are cherished friends of the family, this kind of my project surrounded my family on a more, I guess, personal level. All right, yep, next slide. All right, so I am in the graduate program for library science. I also finished up my bachelor degree online through USM, completely virtual. One thing that's great about the University of Southern Mississippi is that they've had a completely online program since 2002. So when the pandemic did hit and everyone was scrambling about in-person classes, virtual classes, USM was well prepared in this program for already virtual. I've never been to the campus in Hattiesburg, which hopefully when I graduate that I will be there for graduation, but I have spent all of my time with online classes. And so not only were our professors comfortable with that setting, we as students were comfortable as well. I've also, luckily during the pandemic, was able to complete my practicum through the University of Mississippi, that I was able to transcribe Civil War documents for them virtually as well, because that was another concern of mine. Is for my practicum, it's like, if that's going to be due, who knows when the pandemic's going to end, and how is that going to happen? Will there be someplace local here that'll be open for that or not? I was able to complete my other practicum for just general purposes before the pandemic happened. So I was lucky that happened, but I was very happy that the University of Mississippi opened up that process. So I was able to go from there. I think we can go to the next slide. I did grow up near Chicago, but now I live in Plano, Texas, which is outside of Dallas. And I'm a vintage lover and collect and sold vintage things for quite a few years. And I have my own personal collection of community cookbooks, and even ones that my friend recently sent me that my mom, that Carol Johnson was my mom, and that was even her entry into one of the cookbooks. I come from a Czechoslovakian family, so I've got a couple Czech books there as well, that I hopefully, even back this weekend, my son said we need more of our heritage, and so I'm going to be cooking some Czech meals this weekend. Since I've been in the virtual program, my only connection has been virtually, that I've always used the library catalog for all of my projects, for all of my paper, everything. And so I was well versed in what they offered in their general catalog, but also in the archives. A couple of semesters ago, I did write a paper on community cookbooks. And so I knew that the collection was extensive and that I somehow wanted to incorporate it in more of my studies. And it seems like every semester, somehow I can fit it in somewhat. But I did come up with the idea of cooking them. And I was thinking at first when I applied that it was just I would take a couple photographs and it would be in that case. So I was pretty proud when Jennifer offered me an opportunity to have it kind of go on a little bit further. We can go next slide. These are the members of my testing team. A lot of times they're very willing to cook in the kitchen. Other times we do have to encourage or force them to participate. We're not a picky eater kind of family. We are meat eaters, but we're not picky with a lot of meals that I cook. And I am not a professional cook by any means. And I am just a basic home cook that I like to try new recipes, but I definitely have had some flops along the way in just regular cooking. But at the same time, we do enjoy cooking together. And when I speak about non-pickiness, that my son's in that upper corner, his latest thing is he likes the MREs, the meal replacement that military people use. My sister-in-law will pick it up from the base store, and he likes to try new ones. So we're definitely not shy when it comes to recipes. All right, next slide. All right, so when I found out that USM had this great digital collection of cookbooks, I can easily just go through them. I just type in community cookbooks, and I could go for, slide after slide after slide of different choices. It's easy to, if you have an idea in mind of a recipe, a lot of times if you type that in, they've had cataloged it so that a recipe will come up with that in mind. So if there is a popular recipe where it's in repeated ones, a whole list of cookbooks will come up with that same recipe there. All right, next. The first one that I decided to do, I thought I would ease my family into it a little bit, and I chose these butterscotch rolls from the 1950 book. This one stopped my eyes when I was scanning through the list, was just because of the illustrations. Some of the community cookbooks are more basic and hardly have any pictures or images, and this one really had some great graphics, and so that's what stopped me. And then I kind of go through and see what would be tasty, what would be fun, what would be interesting, what's weird, kind of whatever I'm feeling like. And these were the first ones I guinea pigged with my family, and they were well received. They were delicious. I mean, they're sugary sweet, and so I don't see how they could have not liked them, but they turned out very, very good. All right, go next. All right, this one I thought was funny. This one stopped me because of the recipes inside. This was, I just learned from the 1950s that a bride either requested or people in her family gave to her, and they had personal ones that they wrote in. A lot of the cookbooks are either hand typed out or they're sent away to a publisher, and they then send it back to the person who's going to be the fundraising group that's going to be sending. But these were all handwritten from different people, which nicely have the author's names along the side of it. And when I got married, I requested that same idea for families or friends for their favorite recipes to kind of increase my personal collection of recipes. But I thought these were pretty funny because this must have been a young bride that just left home, that there was two recipes on how to cook toast, and that the Melba toast one was recommended for those lighter day diets that you need. So I guess if you're trying to avoid eating or something light, you would cook this toast that you wouldn't know how to. And then the last one was really funny, was how to boil water. So when I'm taking photographs for Instagram or Facebook, once again, I'm not a professional photographer, and so sometimes I struggle with just the right photo. Well, this one said to put the water in a kettle, and I didn't think that I could get the image across as well as if I did it in a pot. But this woman, I said, thanks, Marion, because she said that to put it on high, and then once the water starts dancing, then you remove it carefully from the stove. So I thought, I'm assuming these were serious, but I kind of chuckled that someone had to be taught how to make toast or boil water until it dances. But now I kind of use that phrase all the time because it sounds great. All right, we can go on the next one. All right, one thing, since I grew up in the Midwest, I find a lot of Southern recipes that are new to me, that some I've never even heard of, or some I definitely just haven't come across. Pralines and divinity fudge, or Southern candy, it's sometimes called, or just divinity, come up a lot in almost every single cookbook from way back when through the 70s. And so I pulled my older boy is allergic to nuts, so I had to wait when he was camping for the weekend, and then I did all my nut recipes in one weekend. And so with the praline photo, I took multiple recipes and tried out, because it seems like every cook had their own little spin on what they would add in there and how they turned out, which I thought they were all very delicious, but they varied from recipe to recipe. The divinity fudge is what the recipe was called in this recipe, or candy, was also new to me. I had never really heard of it, and I definitely hadn't tasted it before. And when we did post that online, we did have somebody say, you know, divinity fudge, does it taste like fudge? And before I made it, that's why I was thinking chocolate squares of fudge that you would, you know, pick up on vacation. And it did not taste like that at all. And it was surprising. It was good, but I think like one piece would have been fine, and you could have been good for a while. When I posted it on my own personal page, a lot of people did speak up that, oh, they've heard of it, or their grandma used to make it, but it didn't seem like many were making it currently. All right, next. All right, we have had quite a few hits that have been approved by my family. Because I grew up in a suburb of Chicago, when I came across this one, the Marshall Field Special Sandwich, it right away caught my eye. So my family did highly approve of this one, but I said it had bacon on it. And so my family doesn't easily turn away things with bacon. So it was tasty. And they said that they would definitely have this one again. I also try, because I do have vintage items, I do try and, whatever year the cookbook is from, I try to use my plates or background that fit in that same year. It doesn't always work out, but I do think about that when I'm plating my idea. All right, next. Here's another one that was, I wouldn't say a whole house fan favorite, but my husband and I really liked it. I've had cucumber salads in the past, but this one was called the mayonnaise onions, which sounded quite weird. My kids were not fans of it, but it was very, very tasty, and it would be something I would bring to, if we were going to a friend's house. It has avocados in there, and it just was a fresh tasting, nice salad. The mayonnaise wasn't too overpowering, even though it's coated lightly in it, but it turned out a lot better than I had imagined it was going to. All right, next. Chess pie is another one that comes up a lot that I had never heard of. Once again, maybe that's just me from the Midwest. And so I thought, oh, which chess pie am I going to try, which recipe? And once again, some are very similar, others have variations. But I picked this one because it was my good mother's chess pie. You will see people inscribe on there, oh, this is a good recipe or whatnot. But I thought her placement of good was perfect, because I thought, oh, was this rather than your bad mother's chess pie? You have a good mother and a bad mother. And so it made me chuckle. And this was a quick and easy recipe. And like I said, they ate it right up. Very sugary, but they did eat it right up. All right. We've also had some major fails. This one, although I presented it like we did it for Valentine's Day, I did, after I kind of was on Christmas break, and so I cranked out a lot of recipes during that time. This recipe was for port wine, and it was going to take 30 days from beginning to end, with me stirring every 3 days. Now, a lot of the recipes that are presented in these cookbooks are not from professional recipe writers, and so they're home cooks just like myself. And a lot of times specific directions are left out. They're very vague, and I don't know if they're vague because they're just assuming who's reading it already knows this information, or if it's just because they're not a professional recipe writer and so they're vague. So this one was extremely vague, and I think I have the recipe on the next one, but it had cornmeal and sugar and some lemon juice and juice from oranges, sugar. It had a lot of weird stuff. And then every 3 days, you had to stir it. And so it was real thick when I was stirring it. I did see some fermentation on a couple of the days, the 3 days I would stir it, but it never told me if it had to be in a secured bottle already. Would it have to be a pot? It didn't tell me what vessel to put it in, so I was a little worried, but I did put it in a pot, and I had a lid on it because I didn't think to have it exposed. And was it supposed to be on the shelf? I didn't know that either, so I did keep it in the fridge. And so every 3 days I would stir it and stir it. And I was like, nah, this isn't looking so good. And then it says to strain it at the end. And so the bottom one with the strainer is how it was right before I strained it. So I was still a little apprehensive of how it was going to turn out. And then that bottom picture is what the liquid that came out of it. So it was a very thick, very like thick soup material. So then I started thinking, well, if I was fermenting it along the way, what kind of problems could I have? Could I poison myself if we drink this or eat this? And so I did look up, and you can get botulism if you do not prepare wine correctly throughout the process. And since I was winging it, I did not want to serve my husband something that either one of us would get botulism. So, but I didn't want to have it to go to waste because I spent 30 days on it. And so we did put it in a glass and lightly taste it just so that we could have the taste of it. And it was gritty, super sweet, and very unpleasant. And so after my 30 days, I dumped the whole pot down the drain because it was very sick. And this is what we ended up posting online. But see, it just says, let stand for 3 weeks, stirring every third night, strain and bottle. So was the fermenting happened later when you bottled it? Did you put a lid on it? They did not describe it enough for me. I think I'm one of those cooks that I appreciate step by step by step so that I don't screw anything up. But this person did not help me out. All right, next one. All right, this was another one that was somewhat of a fail. This was for prune whip. And, you know, it seems like for many years, from probably the 30s through the 70s, prunes are used in a lot of recipes. And you don't see that too often today. So what happened to all the prunes? How come people aren't, why did they finally wise up not to cook with prunes? Or how come we don't cook with prunes anymore? But I had to stew the prunes and then whip it up, and then you baked it so that it was a little bit toasted on top. Now, I did not tell my children what we were going to be eating, and it didn't say to put whipped cream on it, but I did make my own whipping cream because I thought, oh, then it looks fancy and like a dessert. And now it tasted like whipped prunes, and it wasn't very tasty, and it did not go over well by any of this. My husband said his mom probably would have liked it. She's an older woman, but I say it was not good at all. All right, you can go to next. All right, this one, although sounds maybe not appetizing to some, I was really looking forward to this one. Growing up outside of Chicago, they had a bunch of Czechoslovakian restaurants, and my grandma would take me, and they had a delicious liver dumpling soup that I always looked forward to. And I've made regular dumplings, bread dumplings with my grandma growing up. And so I had pictured that's how this was going to turn out, just my imagination. And the restaurant we went to, they would have just a nice ball of the liver in the middle of the soup. Well, I never cooked liver before or even handled it before. And so I had to search out where to find liver. And I found a butcher that had liver. And when I asked him to grind it, because that's what I think the recipe says, their grinders were much too large. You had to have, because they ground large quantities of stuff. And so my 3 little slabs of liver was too small for their grinder. So he's like, oh, just put it in a food processor and that should be the same thing. Well, when I put it in a food processor, it liquefied the liver and was rather gross. And then the recipe doesn't tell you I remember making dumplings with my grandma. You formed a ball because there was substance to the ball, and there was no substance to this. You just would drop that liver liquid into the hot water to cook it. And so when it came out, it was not appetizing looking. My husband thought it was pretty good. He liked it. And once again, he said his mom would really like it. But I was severely disappointed just because I had my memory of what it should have looked like and what it should have tasted like. And the kids were not fans. I would say this one was a fail, even though I had high hopes for this one. All right, next. All right, I said we're meat eaters in this family and we're very, very adventurous. But I will admit there's quite a few wild animals that they have nice descriptive comments on there on how to cook it, but we have not yet made any squirrel stew or any kind of rodent food by any means. And even though we're meat eaters and adventurous, this is where we put the brakes on. I will not be making any squirrel stew. It's been a great opportunity for me to be able to do this. We've tried a bunch of recipes that I never would. We've got a bunch on the back burner that are coming through. Of course, those Jell-O ones everyone talks about. Some ones that I purposely choose that I know my family will eat, and some I do just because it sounds horrible, and I know that's one way I can get them. And I say thank you to Jennifer Brannick for giving me this opportunity, and to be able to share my creations and my family's what they think to everyone. So thank you.
And, one thing I would point out with Jen is that, all these pictures, she does such a good job, putting all the pictures together and getting everything to look good. And it's just she has an eye that really works for this, and, that's something I didn't think of when I, just picked this great idea out of the pool, but out of the pool of, submissions, but really she's just done a fantastic job of not only writing really fun and approachable text to it, but having these images that really bring things in. And again, her selection of different recipes really keeps people around because they're like, what?
The photography has been a difficult portion of it because I'm not a professional photographer, and I'm on social media, but I'm not, I don't have 10,000 followers. My pictures aren't all scripted there. And so I have struggled with that, and I'm chatty. And so I want to describe the process to everyone and not just put the photos. And so Jennifer and I have struggled with that about the wordage, how many words you have versus Facebook versus Instagram. And so I do have to edit. She probably has to edit a lot more than I do, but I could go on in the process. And so sometimes my ramblings take longer than others.
Well, it's funny. One thing we learned through this process is because she does write very great, descriptive, engaging text, that there is a limit for characters on Instagram. We had no idea. And then when I get there and I was like, oh, hey, because usually, you see people all the time. Like I follow a lot of recipe Instagrams, and they have entire recipes listed sometimes. So I just figure that's never ending. But there is a limit. But she's done a really, really great job of being engaging, and it's just a perfect topic for social media and a way to kind of promote our collections. So basically, I want to talk just to kind of do a basic overview of our workflow and how we post to social media. So one thing to keep in mind is that, with social media here, we don't allow students to post for us, so we have to do the posting. So it does make it a little, it's not quite as seamless. So Jen has to send me the materials, and then then I put it up through social media. So, when I was coming up with the workflow, I came up with email and OneDrive. And I was like, I started writing out little sentences to make it a little more elaborate. And I was like, this is all there is it's email and OneDrive. So we email back and forth about different things, and we'll Zoom each other every so often to talk about stuff. But at the university, now that we've had OneDrive for a year or two, and Microsoft 365, so she was able to create a folder and share it, and we can drop everything in there and get access to all the documents very easily. So there's not a whole email back and forth of the different materials, especially with images, because it can sometimes be problematic. So that's workflow. It's very, very easy. Now, posting to social media, again, I'd be curious to see what other people use. The things that I'm on now, I try to switch it up every so often. So right now I'm using Facebook Business Suite, and then later for Instagram. So one thing, when we started posting, Instagram's finicky because you can't do live URLs in the posts. So, just from being an Instagram user, I see that, kind of the standard, and this is the standard in university libraries too, is that you do the link in bio kind of thing, so people can go to bio, click on the link there, and it takes you to the URL, the page it needs to go to. So Later does that. And they have a free version that you can get access to. And so it does allow to post all the materials and to do a link in bio so that people can click on that to get to the information. But what wonky about later is, of course, we have free services. We don't pay for our social media. Scheduling programs can be really expensive, so we do not do that. And later only allows one picture to post when you're through their free service, which is the one we have. So Jen and I had a lot of, had some discussions about trying to figure out the best way to do this, because sometimes she'd have a couple images and they're great, and it makes sense to have more than one image. So, but with those, you can't use later. So you can't use the link in bio. I mean, there's just a whole series of things that we would find. So I would have to change a little bit how the post works. I would have to change the wording to, perhaps, copy and paste the link below to find out, to see the item. So it just gets, we did kind of learn our, or at least I learned our limitations in the library about how we can and can't do this to, with the different programs that we have. And then Facebook Business Suite, which you can use for Instagram or Facebook, is also free, and it just makes it really easy to kind of get at. We used to use Hootsuite, but it just they did a lot of updates, and I just thought it kind of got so I stopped using that. But I'm always curious to see what other people are using. And that's all we have. It's just been interesting, kind of the evolution of having a kind of a strong, medium to strong social media presence, and then kind of dwindling off and rebuilding it. And it's just this amazing project that Jen's taken on to be the content creator. But if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to take them.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Jen. There was one question. It was actually two questions. It says, have you only done photos for your posts? Have you tried doing videos in order to show the process? That's from Vic Jones.
I have not yet. A couple of them I did boomerangs, and then I have been apprehensive to send those to Jennifer because then I don't know Facebook, so that would be another layer that we would have to talk about. I would have to I'll have to use one of my guinea pigs again, my real guinea pigs, to film it, but there is some steps that I think would be interesting that you could get the point across better. And I do try to batch cook. When over Christmas break, I knew that this was going to happen, and I knew I had a busy semester coming up, and so I tried to cook a lot. And then I have an Excel spreadsheet that I put, what recipe it is, where the cookbook is from, and so that I try and keep myself on schedule, because we do post twice a month, and so I try and keep that ahead. And if I know if my schedule is going to be crazy, I try and slip in an extra ones. But we have not done videos yet, but maybe that's our next adventure.
And I think that, and again, I posted videos today to our page, and just doing that made me, because Facebook is just the land of easy breezy. You can throw anything on Facebook and it's going to work. We have a 7-minute video that's kind of embedded in there that works. But then I was like, well, let's just see if it goes on Instagram, and it was too large. So that, so it's kind of, and you don't have to do the same thing for each. But being that I'm the sole poster, I like to keep it kind of standardized, I think. But I would love to see if of course, any format works for me.
Do you guys have plans as to like how long this will continue?
Basically, as long as Jen wants to do it. I mean, I told her when she first
Jen,
started.
Are you in on this forever and ever?
Well, that's what, when she first presented it to me, I was hugely proud, and I was super duper duper excited. But that's what she didn't mention that. So I was like, okay, is this a one-time thing, or is this, I graduate in next spring, but I could go on doing it. It's been fun. Just in general, I love cookbooks. And so I love finding new ones. And because my family isn't picky, and it's, it's whatever the cook's cooking that you eat it, or you go hungry or make yourself a sandwich. So it's been a great environment to do it. And I try and research along the way. And so I've learned, I try and find if there isn't I'm writing right now a paper on cataloging cookbooks, which they're not uniform. You know, not everyone there's creators, there's not always authors. Sometimes there's not any dates on there. And so it has been very interesting trying to find the background of some of these things. So I hope it goes on for a while. I hope we're getting a great response on, you know, on our social media, and I hope Jennifer continues to enjoy it.
I do. And, you know, as long as Jen wants to do it, I'm fine. I mean, I don't want to, obviously, I don't want to pressure you, Jen. Like, Jen, you have to do this for forever, you know. But, you know, as long as she's comfortable, then we'll keep doing it.
Yeah.
And I hope to be able to do similar things, you know, in the future with other people, and trying to kind of mix it up a little bit where, you know, it keeps things fresh and there's a different voice, because I think her voice is so good and so unique and so engaging, and every other post is my voice, you know, and I mean, I can only be like, check out, so often, you know, so I try to, you know, it's good to have different people in there to mix it up, and I think Jen adds a little spice to it.
And you know, I can plan it without it only twice a month. I plan it around my life. I had a pretty major surgery at the beginning of the semester, which I do not recommend that at all. But since I knew the surgery was coming up, like I said, batch cooked. And so I have a lot that are just waiting for me to just send to Jennifer. And so it hasn't been stressful. We've had fun.
Now, I don't know if I missed it. Does it have an official title for the posts that come?
Yes, we call it What's Cooking in Special Collections. And so it's a title that I think fits of what's actually going on in social media, and I mean in the special collections. And one of the things that I enjoyed about it is that it shows how usable archives or special collections are. It's not just for this heavy, serious research and only, you know, scholarly people can use the archives, that it can be by just regular people, and it can be hundreds, you know, I don't even know how far Plano is to Hattiesburg, but it can be done wherever. And that's my big thing with COVID, was been a great a positive, is not only that I've spent all this quality time with my family still every single day, all day long, is that this makes it accessible to the world. You know, people that would normally not be able to leave their house or not have opportunity to have an education if you had to go in person to class. So having classes virtually, I would always think that's a wonderful opportunity. But with COVID bringing this, I think it's more accessible to the world, that people really had to miss out on without that opportunity.
Great, thank you. Does anybody else have any questions? I think this is really, really cool.
She's done a great job.
Yeah, I mean, it was an excellent idea and it came along right at the right time. How long have you been doing it?
Right
January?
around, yeah, say January,
Okay.
December is when we started talking about it.
Yeah, okay, so it did come along right at the right time.
Yeah.
So